This is particularly important if you've been absent, because as you grow older, you're going to find that the further along in school you get, the more teachers will expect you to read and understand, and their lectures will add on to or enhance that reading. So what we're going to do in areas where I think the concepts are relatively simple, and they're things you've seen before, you saw this in grade 8 algebra, I'm going to have you do some reading. So in your textbook, if you would read page 79, try to answer these questions, so you'll need to pause the recording and go ahead and turn it back on, and I'll go over those answers with you. So what you should have found, and these answers were pretty much right there, meaning you just read and you said, oh, there's the answer. Slope is a ratio of a line's rise, its vertical change, to its run, its horizontal or side-to-side change. Ratios compare two numbers. So that's what makes them a little bit different than, say, just a fraction. Rise relates to the y values, or the y coordinate values, and the run values that relate to the x values, or the x coordinate values. So that means that slope equals the ratio rise over run. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take a minute, pause the recording, write down anything you didn't have, which is probably compares two numbers, y values, x values, and slope equals rise over run. As soon as you're done doing that, start recording again. The other thing you would have found for number 2 is that slope is measured on a non-vertical line. And it's going to make, this next definition is going to make more sense when we get to the back side of the notes. But the reason for that is that there are 4 kinds of slope. There's positive slope, negative slope, zero slope, and undefined slope. And when you have a vertical line, as opposed to a non-vertical line, you get undefined slope, which is why slope has to be measured on a non-vertical line, meaning it can't be a line that goes straight up and down. Okay, what I'd like you to do again is pause the recording, write that down, because I'm sure you don't have that last part of the definition, and then start the recording up again. And then finally, for number 3, slope is represented by the letter M, and there's no connection between slope and M, but that's what the letter is. And the slope formula is, and remember, formulas are equations, so they need to be set equal to something. So M equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1. Let me fix that. Once again, M equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Again, if anything is not written down, pause the recording and write it down. So moving along now to the next part of the notes. Okay, the directions say graph the ordered pairs to find the slope by showing the slope triangle, and the green relates to the book, so you'll see this still on page 79. Then use the slope formula to find it mathematically. My suggestion is it would be wise to use the additive inverse, which I also call the subtraction rule. To change challenging subtraction problems into addition problems. But the first thing I'd like you to do is plot both sets of points, and then we'll move from there. Please connect those points with a line using a ruler and putting arrows on the end of the lines, because they're a continuous function. So make sure you use a line to connect the points with arrows, because it's a continuous function. Okay, so we won't be able to see number 5 for just a moment here. First thing that I want you to do is go to page 80. Again, this is about learning to use your textbook. I want you to look at the picture that you've drawn here, and I want you to determine which of the 4 slopes you're looking at. Is it negative slope, positive slope, zero slope, or undefined slope? Look at the pictures on page 80 in the blue box, and you'll make that decision, and you'll write it right here on this line. The next thing is I want you to write M equals rise over run. It's good to have that ratio constantly in your head. And so we're going to be doing the rise over run together in just a moment, and I'll do that with you. And then I want you to come over and write M equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Again, sub, S-U-B, means below, so that's why it's y sub 2 and y sub 1, not y2, y1. All right, with that said, let's go ahead and proceed with this. I'm going to go ahead and change colors just to make it show up a little bit better. So if I look on page 80, I see that the first one is positive slope. The line is rising from left to right. And I look at the second picture, it's negative slope, and the line is falling from left to right. And so that's the one that this one looks like. It's falling. Here's your left side right here. It's falling from left to right. So this is negative slope. Oh, that didn't change. Let's see. So that's negative slope. Now we're going to look at rise over run. In their book, you can see on page 79, the picture that they give you was one that was positive slope, so they went up. So many students will go down from here, 1, 2, 3. And so the rise equals 3. Okay, now the run is the horizontal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you can just look at it and go, it's from negative 3 to 0 is 3, from 0 to 5 is 5, so that's 8. So the run equals 8. So rise is 3. Notice I'm not putting the negative with it. And the run is 8. Even though I went down, I know I went in a negative direction. I'm not going to use that. I'm just going to know that this picture shows negative slope, so I'm going to stick the negative out in front. So m equals negative 3/8. So that's slightly different than the book. Now, for the actual mathematical, we are going to substitute our values in. The neat thing about this is you get to decide what your y sub 2 is. So I'm going to decide that this negative 1 is y sub 2, and that means this 5 is x sub 2. And then if that's the sub 2's, then these have to be the sub 1s, so x sub 1 and y sub 1. So it's y sub 2 minus y sub 1. So negative 1 minus 2, m equals negative 1 minus 2 over, and then if I chose negative 1 as my y sub 2, then 5 has to be my x sub 2. So 5 minus negative 3. And so m equals, now I'm going to use that subtraction rule or the additive inverse. All subtraction problems can be written as addition problems. So negative 1, subtraction changes to addition, 2 becomes its opposite, which is negative 2. 5 stays the same, subtraction becomes addition, negative 3 changes to its opposite, which is 3. So negative 1 plus negative 2 is negative 3, and 5 plus 3 is 8, and the answers match exactly. M equals negative 3/8. So two strategies for doing the exact same thing. Many times you don't have graph paper, which is why you need to be able to do this mathematically. We're just calculating those differences in rise and those differences in run. All right, I'd like you to try number 5. So go ahead and make sure it's graphed, and then we'll go from there. So, excuse me, we already did 5. Excuse me. I'd like you to try number 6. But before we leave this, I want to focus you in on quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, these are written with Roman numerals, and quadrant 4. IV is 4. We're going to be using this idea of quadrant 1 is positive, positive for the x and y coordinates. Quadrant 2 is negative, positive. Quadrant 3 is negative, negative for the x and y coordinates. And quadrant 4 is positive, negative. Okay, here's the graph for number 6. And you can see it's a horizontal line. So again, looking at page 80, I want you to figure out what kind of slope it is just by looking at it. And then we come over here, we're going to do the mathematical. So go ahead and do the mathematical. Let's keep it interesting though. And I want to, last time we selected the second ordered pair as our x sub 2, y sub 2. Let's this time go ahead and select the first ordered pair as our x sub 2, y sub 2, and that means the second order pair will be x sub 1, y sub 1. Okay, go ahead and solve that. Turn the recording back on when you're finished. Okay, so when you look at this, horizontal line is 0 slope, so m is just 0. You didn't have to do anything other than that. There was no slope triangle to put on this like you did on the previous problem, number 5. Now, number 6, when I substituted in the values, and again, if you reverse the order of these, you'd still end up with the same answer, essentially. You'd get 0 over negative 6, which would then also become 0. So y sub 2 is negative 1 minus y sub 1, which is negative 1. X sub 2 is 4. X sub 1 is negative 2, so 4 minus a negative 2. You use the additive inverse or the subtraction rule. Negative 1 plus 1 is 0. 4 plus 2 is 6. You can't leave the answer as 0 0 over 6, or 0 divided by 6. If you put that into your calculator, you end up with the slope of, you end up with 0, which is our slope, m equals 0. Okay, on page 80 at the top, we've already used it before, but now I'd like you to sketch a picture of the various kinds of slope and then to write the attributes of each, meaning what's true about each. So first, let's go ahead and use 2 different colored pens or pencils. That would be good. We're going to draw coordinate graphs in, so I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so you have your coordinate graphs, and now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to do positive slope with you. So I'm looking at page 80. You can draw it exactly like I've drawn it. You can draw it exactly like the book's drawn it, or somewhere in between. So we're going to draw a line with positive slope, rises from left to right. So first of all, m is greater, slope is greater than 0, and the line rises, and this is important, from left is over here, to right. Okay, I'd like you to do the same thing for the other 3, and then turn it back on and see if you got all the attributes in the drawings correct. Now, they might not be exactly like mine, but they have to be the same idea. Okay, so negative slope, the line falls from left to right, and your slope is less than 0. 0 slope will be a horizontal line, and m equals 0. And then the last one is an undefined slope, which is a vertical line, and so m would be undefined. In these next 3, 11, 12, and 13, you'll see 3 of the 4 in action. So go ahead and let's get 11 done together, or get you started, then you'll do that, and then I'll put steepness of lines on another recording. Okay, first thing I did on 11 was look at the quadrants. 3, 2 is in quadrant 1, -2, -3 is in quadrant 3. And I know if I'm going diagonally from quadrant 3 to quadrant 1, that the line is going to rise and give me positive slope. So pay attention to those kinds of patterns using your quadrants. So we have m equals 2 minus -3, where I chose the first ordered pair. 2 was y sub 2 and 3 was x sub 2. And then the denominator is 3 minus -2. I used the subtraction rule. 2 stayed the same, subtraction changed to addition, and -3 became its opposite of 3. For the denominator, the run, 3 stayed the same, subtraction changed to addition, and -2 became 2. 2 plus 3 is 5. The denominator is 3 plus 2, that's 5, so it's 5 over 5, which simplifies to 1 over 1. So it has a rise of 1 and a run of 1, and it's got positive slope. And when we write it in an equation, it would be simply m equals 1. You try numbers 12 and 13. Please take a minute to write the quadrants down, see if you can figure out the slope even before you start. That might help you. And then we'll have you turn the recording back on and check your answers. All right, for number 12, -1,8 and -1,1 are both in quadrant 2. 1 is in quadrant 2, and -1 is in quadrant 3. If you kind of visualize these, they will both be in a straight vertical line, -1,8 and then -1, -1. And you can tell that because the x coordinates are the same, and we know that vertical lines are undefined slopes. So now let's look at the math. We go 8 minus -1 over -1 minus -1, subtraction rule. 8 plus 1, which is 9, -1 plus 1, which is 0. 9 divided by 0, you can never divide by 0. You'll get an error on your calculator, so we know the slope is undefined. Now let's look at number 13, -5, 4, and -1, 4. Oh, notice they have the same y coordinate. So if you think about it on a number line, these are both in quadrant 2. It's going to be a horizontal line, which has 0 slope. And again, those y coordinates are the same. So we're going to use the mathematical way, 4 minus 4, which is 0. -1 minus -5, subtraction rule, -1 plus 5, which gives you 4. So 0 divided by 4 equals 0. So the slope on that one is 0. The steepness of lines will be addressed in a second recording. So that is all for this one today.